Good morning. I'm Dave Kilpatrick. This is Tim Cuppett. We are Tim Cuppett Architects. We'd like to thank our AIA Austin Homes Tour title sponsor, Dalglish Construction Company. David Dalglish, we were fortunate enough to work with him on this project. He was a contractor for Camp Frio. And we are going to let David tell you a little bit about Camp Frio before we dive in and talk a little bit about our work and some of the characteristics of our work and the history of our work that ultimately led to the design and construction of Camp Frio. Share our screen.
Okay. David, welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, it was good. Good morning to be on a Zoom tour. I never done this before, so on a tour anyway.
Well, this is a first for all of us too, so we'll find out how it goes. David, I would like to start with a few images. I'm going to share my screen here. And I would like to have you talk about, as I click through these images, I would like to have you speak to kind of the idea. When did this happen? When was the seed planted for Frio Canyon? How did this all come about?
Yeah, well, first let me say congratulations to Tim and David for having a house on the tour and all the architects out there. I really love what the AIA has done. I think I had a house with Sinclair Black on the very first one, way back there, and always supported it. Really happy for us promoting architecture like we have. But Frio Canyon, this is a picture here. You can see the red stripe of cypress trees going down the Frio River. And it was 2007, New Year's Day. All the football games we wanted to see were over. And my son-in-law said, hey, let's go look at some land. And he showed me how to look for land on the computer, which I didn't, that was all new in 2007. And we got in the car and drove down there and stumbled across the guy that on New Year's Day that just happened to be having his truck idling out in front of the real estate place. And he took us through there, and I think got home at 11 o'clock that night. It's a 2.5-hour drive from Austin. And we fell in love with it, and we looked around for 6 months. Sherry and I bought 580 acres, and then this particular other section, there was an 800-acre ranch, which we bought 580 acres of, and the other part of the ranch, they decided they were going to do a high-density mobile home development in it, and I just, I thought, well, there's places for those, but not there, and so I ended up getting a partner and buying him out in a defensive mode, ended up developing Frio Canyon. And the concept was a cluster development with a sensitivity to architecture and design. And we knew the wildlife was going to be spectacular, the stars at night, the hill country, the rugged hill country, the fall colors, the river, all of that. We knew that was going to be awesome, and it was. But what we discovered was the community of families that really became the most valuable part of it. And that's a good picture there. And I think we have 30 families now and maybe 20 houses there, and several are interviewing architects right now, including Tim and David. And, when we were there during the COVID, I got there the beginning of spring break weekend, and we were there for almost 12 weeks straight. And there were, I think, an average of 8 or 10 families that were there for 11 to 12 weeks straight. And it was quite a different arrangement of doing social distancing on stand-up paddle boards. But we got to get there. We got there before the spring sprung and left after everything was in full bloom. So it was quite an experience. And, it's something that took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over the years, but seeing it mature and turn into what it is, it's pretty incredible. There's the world famous tree house on that house that's on the screen there, right at the bottom, about where the F in Frio Canyon is. There's the world famous treehouse there, the treehouse Pete built. It was on the Discovery Channel Treehouse Masters, and that turned into 4 or 5 tree houses over in Sabinal River and the Frio River with other people that saw that show. And But it's pretty neat. A lot of really neat architectural designs out there, all cottage scale architecture, but sensitive to craft and history. And it's been a fun thing to be a part of.
Yeah, this is what I think draws the people.
Yeah. Yeah, the cypress trees are amazing tree to watch them. And we have some 8-10 foot around, just giant trees in some of the places there. And there's a lot of waterfalls and a lot of springs. We have a phase 2 that we've developed, which is to the left of this picture. And we're holding it for a few years, but we call it Headwaters Springs. And it's like the Land 1100 Springs. There's just water coming out of the hills. It's just amazing to see what's happened. But
I want to point out in this photograph before we move on that this is Camp Frio. This is the main house of Camp Frio, probably under construction or just after construction before the site was revegetated. But what's interesting to me is in this photo, it looks compressed. The development looks rather compressed, but when on site, we don't really experience the other houses in this way. You know, there is a sense of a good amount of separation between the houses.
yeah, and that's the cluster community that I talked about. So along the river there in the creek, where the homes are, and to the left where that mountain is, that bluff, it's about 500 feet above to the top of it in elevation. That's about 120 acres of common area that everybody shares for hiking. And there's a lot of mountain biking, hiking, stargazing. It's, you know, quite a bit. That field that's right in the center of the picture is a dedicated wildflower field. So we blocked out certain areas where people can't build because we're trying to, you know, really demonstrate some of what the hill country is about. So we plant that with wildflowers. There's another one to the left of this picture, and this development was not about you know, the bottom line dollar and everything. It was about really how to do something really special. And I think every single family that's bought in their plan is that it would be their children's house someday. So they don't look at it as a buy and flip. And we call it a legacy community for that reason. And it's about our kids, our grandkids, and the next generation as well as our own. And that's been a big part of what we've done. We don't allow VRBO because we don't want strangers in there, but we rent to each other, and we have big weddings or parties and stuff out there. So it's really a fun time. We'll have a fall colors party this year and it's weekend in November. And we've got People's Choice coming out, a band, and we'll have a dance. And you have 80-year-old people with 4-year-old kids out there dancing on the dance floor. It's pretty fun.
We had somebody raise their hand. Antonio, do we have a question?
We don't have any questions written out, no.
Let's see, how do I
think it's saying somebody's raising their hand on the chat or however that works.
do you know how I hear the question?
Attendees.
Tim, if you click Q&A, you'll be able to see the questions, if any have
There
come
are
in.
no-
This is not a question. This is somebody raising their hand, wanting to, go to the Q&A. Maybe they've typed it in there.
Where is it?
Right here.
No question. So we're just gonna experiment here. Laura, did you have a question?
Might be on mute.
She's unmuted, but
Okay, we'll figure this out. You guys, if you do have questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A, and Antonio will interrupt us and ask questions as we go through.
You know, while you're doing that, one thing I'll say that I thought was really neat is the Carters who own the Camp Frio that Tim and David designed. They have two little children, they call them A and B, and they spent a lot of time in Maine as well, but they were really great to work with. And Tim, I'll never forget when I saw some of the interior colors and wallpaper and this granny wallpaper on the ceiling and this modern shaped buildings, these vintage selections. I thought this is going to be wild. And I was afraid of it. And I have to say, I was so impressed at how they put that together. It really is a spectacular, special combination of vintage and modern. And you don't hear those two words in the same sentence very often, but they really pulled it off and have a lot of respect for them.
This is kind of typically how docks are developed along the edge of the river. You can see one of the houses.
Rope swing. We spent a lot of time on those rope swings.
This is not our family. This is just
That's a good friend of mine.
another family out there. But this is so typical. I had the pleasure of going out and spending the night on site with the family in June while they were in quarantine, and the Carters had invited another family to join them in March for a week, and then everything shut down, and the family stayed all summer.
Yeah.
And they had two children approximately the same age as Abe and B, and it's Abe and B.
Yeah, Abe and B.
And the kids played outside. They were outside all the time. And there's a dinner bell in the house. They ring when it's time to come in to eat. Okay, before I go to that, does anybody have any questions for David about the development of Frio Canyon? He developed the property and installed utilities. They are performing all the construction and do a magnificent job. I'd like to say before we made just a few site visits over the whole course of that project, and his team are such skilled craftsmen, and they read drawings. We developed a relatively simple set of drawings, but I mean, they followed them. And we were so impressed every time we went out. I think Dave and I made a total of 4 site visits over the course from building location to final punch, 4 site visits.
Yeah.
Which is pretty incredible to achieve the level of quality that you did, David. The guys in the field are amazing, and the superintendent was good about asking questions through the process, intelligent questions, and it just went as smoothly as it could possibly go.
Well, it was fun when we first started out there trying to find good quality people. We tore half the stuff out that we installed until we finally got a really good plethora of subs. And I've got 8 people that live in the Hill Country full time. So we do stuff all over the Hill Country in West Texas. We have projects out north of Marfa. We have a ranch project in Mason, one in Camp Wood, a couple getting ready to start in Frio Canyon. So we have a pretty big presence out there, and that's helped us really recruit and attract good quality subcontractors. And it's nice because a lot of them are very thankful that we hire them to do good work because they don't get an opportunity to really show off their craft. And that's really neat to see these people. And we've really found some good subcontractors and suppliers, and we developed friendships with them over the years, and it's been really a blessing to be a part of all of that. But it was a 10, 12-year struggle of culling through people and finding people that really wanted to do the good work, and we've been able to do that now.
Yeah. Well, if we don't have any questions for David, I'm going to switch gears now and get into the rest of our topics.
Let me just say this. I'm going to say congratulations to all you architects that are on the tour and working with you over the years. It'll be our 40th year. Will be our 40th anniversary for Dalglish Construction Company in April of 2021. And dates me, but working with some of you guys way back in the day and brilliant people like Tim and others that we've worked with. It's just a real privilege to live in Austin and work on some of the finest homes and now in the Hill Country. So congratulations to you guys. I'm going to go out to my grandson's birthday party and let you have the rest of your time. And good job, AIA, for what you're doing.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David, for participating, for all of the support, and for participating this morning. I do see some questions, which we'll get into in the content as we move forward. But David, I didn't see any questions that I can't answer, so you're free to go.
Sounds good. Thanks, David. Thanks, Tim.
You bet. Thank you.
So this morning we have our our participants or listeners are a combination of architecture lovers and architects who are gaining some continuing education credits for this webinar and our other live webinars. So I'm going to be talking to both groups of people. And this morning we're going to show some of early examples of our work that kind of led to Camp Frio and how we develop sites to maximize owner participation with the building site. And we're also going to discuss a term, gezelligheid, which is a Dutch term that J.R. Carter, the owner of Camp Frio, introduced us to. It's a concept that we have incorporated within our house development for years, but it's a new term to me, and I didn't really, it doesn't translate well to English, except that it's a feeling of belonging, coziness, warmth, comfort, and it relates to environments that we try to create in our homes that evoke those feelings of gezelligheid. It's a hard one to say. So I've got a few images just at the beginning to illustrate that concept. These are not our work. These are just places that feel inviting to me. We often look at historic precedents when we're working on a new house, even a modern house. We're usually looking at precedents in history for creating those feelings of comfort and invitation, camaraderie.
I read somewhere about gezelligheid, because there's not a direct translation to English, or to our culture rather. One of the places I read about it was giving examples, and some of the examples were dining in a cafe with a fireplace, or sitting on a sidewalk at an urban cafe with a dense scale conversation with a friend or a loved one, the smell of cookies baking, and these were all the things that embodied gezelligheid. And the antithesis of that in this particular document I was reading was a dentist office, which is decidedly not gezelligheid.
This is an image that I just refer to often because I just like it. To me, it embodies those characteristics that we're trying to create. A built-in bench in a corner, a little bit of a whimsical stare. One thing that I think is common in these images is the sense of scale, the comfort that they provide to a human-sized being. Another quality of gezelligheid is enclosure, and this kind of dark interior enveloping a person is comforting. We know we don't want our interiors to be all dark, but some dark places are good. This, again, scale, I think texture has a lot to do with it, materiality, natural materials evoke gezelligheid. The enclosure of the tent. We didn't get a photograph at Frio, but we have a fire ring there as well, out in the pasture. Gezelligheid involves all of the senses too. Celebrating taste and smell are part of it. So we're going to move into some early projects. Some of these you guys may be familiar with. We're going to move through them pretty quickly to get to Frio. But this first one is a house that was on the Homes Tour a few years ago, House in Trees. And I've included it because I want to talk about the site development for a moment. This is out at Watersmark at Barton Creek. Watersmark is a community that was developed to be more natural. There are not property lines, but there are building sites. There are no fences. When I worked with the homeowners of this property, we were actually making lot selections. The building site of this, for this house, actually was a large rectangle, but half of it, you can see this dotted line, is an easement. This is a giant easement. And so the lot was determined to be really unbuildable. So it was half the price of the other lots. I told the homeowner, if we've got 28 feet clear, we can design a house for that lot. And so I encouraged them to get this lot, and because I knew that I could use the money that they saved on site selection in development of the house. And they did it, and this is what we did. So there's this giant easement. There will be no development in this direction. This is a porch that runs along the edge of the house and turns to an outdoor living space. This is House and Trees. It was on the tour. It also won a local AIA Design Award a few years ago.
It's funny when the camera is kind of standing in front of a cart path on the golf course. The cart path runs along this edge, and the house in this photo, the house is so vibrant. When you're driving past the house on the cart path from the golf course, you almost don't notice the house when you drive by. It is,
which is intentional.
Right. The vegetation has really taken back the site, and the house is weathered, and it just recedes into the lot.
So this is standing in that easement. Along that entry porch, there is a reflecting pool. When you come from an auto court down here, walk up the porch, when you get to the water, you have to turn and go in the front door. So this is standing outside the front door, looking back toward, you can see a golf course beyond, but this area out to the left will never be developed because it's that easement. But it's a good example of building a skinny house up against an edge so that we can make the most out of that undeveloped land adjacent. The second floor has windowsills that are elevated like this, so we get these beautiful views through the trees. Can't see other houses from this property. This is a different site, completely different. This is a lot in the middle of Terrytown, but it's a big lot. It's a size of 2 lots. The program and the program for this house was very large and really wanted to be on a piece of property that was even larger than this is. They wanted it to feel like a country house. By the way, Watersmark, that House and Trees, is about 10 years old, as is this one, or this is probably 15 years old. But what we did here, this actually is Pecos Street. Because we had, and the really pretty part of the property was this corner with these trees, the hill is falling away. We had enough room, you know, houses typically are positioned parallel and perpendicular to the street. I think there's this preconceived notion that that is the right way to do it. And I realize on an urban lot, that's the best you can do usually because of the size. But this one, because it was larger, we had an opportunity to rotate the house. Well, by rotating this house 45 degrees, when inside the house, we're always looking through to on the diagonal of the property. So the property actually feels much bigger than it actually is when you're inside the house. That was the intentional twist, and it worked. There's this 1-room deep house around a terrace, and then there is a glass room on each end looking into this tree cover. That's from the motor court, front of house, very traditional, very different in style. Our houses do not, they don't all look the same. We work on traditional old homes in central Austin to new modern homes, and like all of it, as much as I love modern architecture, I live in a historic home. I just threw this in because it's a pretty photo. But this is one of those glass rooms on the north end of that house. So the interaction with the site here is strong. That's another. Oh, another aspect of Hazelahide is this incorporation of personal things, I think, that belong to the homeowner. This particular homeowner is an amateur photographer with her own darkroom, and she had over the years developed these photos. So this is the gallery that leads back to the main bedroom, has all of her family photos on the wall. I think that's a characteristic we try to incorporate a lot, is making sure to pull in as much of the homeowner's personality and interest as we can. The main bedroom in that house is not a large bedroom, but it's kind of dark and moody. I think this is another example of creating this kind of cozy nest that evokes Hazelahide.
I think that idea, this is something we talk about a lot, that is kind of unrelated to the topic in some ways, but I think many architects tend to make houses that they're proud of. They're really excited about them. I know this happens to us. And when you go to shoot it, it feels like there's nothing to shoot. And then sometimes the houses that you are less excited about, when the homeowner moves in and they have a real collection of stuff, their personality is evident in the house. The house is so much better. I can't tell you how many times we have a house and it gets photographed and I go, wow, I wasn't expecting that one to be so good. The homeowner has really great stuff. You're not running around going, okay, we have a shoot in 2 days and we have to fill a house with personality.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the next one. This house is from 2009, and it was a modern farmhouse. I hate to say that, before they were 2011. Sorry, before we even knew those things existed, and now they have taken over.
We knew we wanted to make a modern farmhouse, and in looking for precedent, the only thing we could really find was David Selmella's Jackson Meadow.
Yes. This is a large site out west of town. And it has some great trees on it, and it's a big meadow, which is why we wanted it to feel like a farmhouse. Well, instead of plopping the house in the middle of the site, we moved it to this upper corner, so that, and that did two things. One, this family had 2 small children, 2 toddlers at the time. We created this little intimate play yard that is fenced and secure, but the meadow is so beautiful. We wanted the house to really look out over the meadow, and we wanted to leave this area undisturbed. So that's why the house is offset to the edge. You'll recognize the house maybe. This won an AIA award the year that it was finished, local AIA Design Award. It also won Southern Living's Best New Home of that year. So it got some publicity, but it recalls an old farmhouse. But the interior has elements of Hazelahide. The scale of the rooms is not large, it's comfortable, but we incorporate the owner's things. Another aspect that this house illustrates well is we always try to get we expose multiple sides of a room to natural daylight. Rooms that have daylight coming in from more than one side are more comfortable to occupy. This living room happens to project out, so there are windows behind me and on both sides. Well, there's a stairwell in the middle of the house. There's a dormer up in the roof that lets natural light into the stairwell. So we added this glazed window to actually get natural light in from the stairwell. So this room actually has light on all 4 sides. And I think that adds to the comfort during the day. This house also has a built-in seat in the corner of the kitchen for that eat in the kitchen feeling, and this is looking out to the meadow beyond. there's a playroom upstairs that's right above the kitchen that we intentionally pulled the ceiling down to change the scale of this room. And with this, there's a beautiful oak tree outside of this window. So it has kind of a treehouse feel. Switching gears, we got to do a farmhouse in Pendleton, Texas. Pendleton is between Austin and Temple, and it's a little town.
Between Temple and Waco.
Temple and Waco, sorry. Pendleton is here. Our site is a farm that's here. This is Pendleton. This is what's left of Pendleton.
Pendleton's a railroad stop that time forgot about.
Yeah. That is Pendleton from our project site. This is the farm, and then there's a lot behind us. There was a house on this site that the family has loved for decades. They raised their children here, but now the families are growing with grandchildren, and they wanted a bigger house where everybody could come and stay for holidays like they always had. The house was sited in between some trees that were there, and it felt like the right spot. So we decided to deconstruct the house. We saved the brick and the longleaf pine that we could, and built a new house on the site. This is the road that comes in. This is the new house laid over the old house. There's a barn, a large barn here that the homeowner built himself.
The 75-year-old homeowner built himself.
Yes, a surgeon from Scott and White on the weekends built this barn. There's an old historic barn here. There's a funny little old crummy garage that has a wonderful playroom on the second floor. We kept that. We originally thought that we would connect the main house to the garage with a covered walk, but that didn't happen. This is the house we built back. You can see the big barn beyond, and then the new house. This is what's left of the brick from the old house after we covered the foundation and used the brick for the chimneys. The new house is so much bigger than the old house. The scale was larger, that we wanted to do what we could to kind of diminish the impression of that. And so one of the things that worked well for us, a homeowner, you can see how tall the porch is. I just like that shot because she loves her house. We exaggerated details and the scale of the fenestration. These windows are 6 feet tall. You know, that might be perceived from a distance as a 4-foot window, but because all of the elements are overscaled, the house looks right.
You can see the house from nearly a mile away. It sits out on the hill in this Blackland Prairie meadow, and there are no objects anywhere near the house to gauge the scale. So from the road, as you're kind of coming in from Pendleton, it could be a 15-foot tall old house, but it's not until you get closer to it you realize it's a 2017 house that is sort of pumped up and overscaled.
And it recalls an old house inside, which is what the homeowner wanted. And it's got the really high ceilings, but the detailing is very simple and crisp. This is all natural light. There's no, we did not use any artificial lighting to shoot. We've got some daylight coming in from the second floor that kind of is this highlight.
The detailing of this house, in some ways, in the detailing and the experience of performing CA on this house, somewhat informed how we ultimately treated the detailing for Camp Frio, in that the project site was remote enough that we had no idea who the trades were going to be, what our level of communication would be. So the plan was, okay, how much can we simplify the detailing and sort of rely on these beautifully crafted rudimentary assembly of sort of typical parts that you might find at the lumber yard?
This fireplace is in the kitchen. Rather than because we have a big fireplace out on the giant screened porch, I didn't want to put another one in the living room, so we put one in the kitchen because they wanted an interior fireplace. This is lumber and brick reused from the old house. The handyman who works on the farm actually built these benches. So that's kind of a cool side story.
I think Wade took a pass at it first.
The homeowner.
The homeowner took a pass at it first, and it didn't work out.
Excuse me, Tim and Dave, just
Yes.
so you're aware of time, it's almost 40 past.
Oh, I got to go fast. Sorry. Another site in Austin, really long, deep site. Rather than have the house in the center, we pushed it to an edge so that one could experience the whole project through the site. When you're up on the plinth, this is a screened porch that looks all the way from the front to the back. There are these giant oak trees that kind of wrap around that screened porch. We've got to get to Frio.
I think you ought to just jump through to.
Yeah, I'm going to go on to Frio. We were almost there anyway.
If you guys go a little over, that's fine.
This is a renovation in South Austin, which I'm going to get through pretty quickly. Ugliest house on the block, but the block was so cool, and the house is a masonry house. We wanted to keep it.
Oh, I lobbied to tear that thing down.
No, I wanted to
Stuff
keep it
out.
because that block is awesome. So that's what we made. So we made a new house. We added a little guest house in the garage in the back, and we actually took measurements of the limbs so that we could weave the new structure into the tree that was beside it. It has, it embodies a Zellite, I think. The scale of the rooms is intimate. The natural lighting is good. We gutted the interior, laid it out, and took out in the center hall and put the kitchen in the middle of the house. There's a breakfast room, built-in nook. This bookcase is kind of pantry and also walk through to the main bedroom. We converted a corner bedroom into 2 bathrooms. We left the window opening. We added a window where there was a door and installed an outdoor shower. Another old house in Hemp Hill Park, just north of UT. This is the old house on a really big lot. We didn't need to make the house bigger. This is what we started with. It had been abandoned for a few years and gutted it was going to be part of a larger construction project that was abandoned and resold, and turned the house into that, and kept the yard intact. We didn't need to add on much. Back of house, Hemp Hill Park is in the distance. Back of house, we added a new screened porch and a kitchen expansion. So, 2 little kids live here, so they've got this giant play yard in the back now to run around. We kept the interior, we actually restored the interior shapes of rooms because they were comfortable. We reused the owner's furnishings. There's one new, this is a new chair. Otherwise, they had everything. We just repurposed it. This is the kitchen expansion, which we wanted to have an old house feel. Pantry beyond, pantry gets a window.
And the homeowner has it. If you go back one image real quick. No, sorry, to the kitchen. The homeowner has. You can see a few some jadeite, right? And there's a plate rack to the left hanging from that upper cabinet. The homeowner collects that jadeite, and we discovered that. We said, "Oh, fantastic!
So we're
going to make your kitchen marmoleum green."
Oops, wrong way. Second floor had ceilings intact, all these wood ceilings where the cheesecloth and paper had been removed, but they looked exactly like this when we found the house. So we said, let's not touch the ceilings, let's leave them alone so you can still see the nails with the cheesecloth. And we didn't do anything, we just protected the ceilings and kept going. This is a little house in which we built an attic. We added a second floor up in here and extended the attic and pushed the entry hall up to get the stair in to get upstairs. The attic room, great scale. Hazelite. Another site, an urban site where we pushed the house to the edge so that we could experience the side yard all the way through. The house is new, but it's in Clarksville, so it plays nice with its neighbors. It's got a front porch and familiar form. The interior is new, but it kind of recalls the scale of those older homes. This is an open corner. There are giant glass doors that pocket into the wall. There's a screened-in porch on that corner. Hazelite living room. There's a TV floating in front of the bookcase. There's an interior opening from the stairwell into the kitchen. Just a nice little peekaboo, little surprise. The scale of the rooms is small, cozy. This is, from the porch, you can look all the way through from the front yard through the backyard. So that was how we developed that site. This was on a tour a couple of years ago. Mid-century modern, that was not a good one on the back of this property, but a beautiful creek running along the side. This is what we started with. This was the old house. There was a new apartment project. I mean, there was an apartment project just kind of screaming over the top of it. We renovated the old house and then added a room in the middle, which ended up blocking the apartment complex in the back. Zelahide really illustrated here. I feel like it's a great room. We've been in there at night. You kind of sit underneath this lower ceiling. The bookcases glow. There's a big fireplace opposite. It's a cozy room.
I think this room is worth mentioning, the expansion and contraction of the volumes that we'll ultimately talk about here in just a minute or two for Camp Frio. But earlier we talked about, or you talked about some rooms are good to be dark. The same can be said about volume, and we often in our projects try to focus on some spaces that are very cozy, and the ceilings are much lower than what most homeowners' preconceived notion of a ceiling in a house should be today. So while some spaces are dark, some spaces are light, some spaces are have a tall ceiling and others have a lower ceiling, and the idea is to create a different experience in different places of the house. We don't want the bathroom to feel like the kitchen, to feel like the living room.
This is a new project that we just finished on a beautiful site over Shoal Creek. Maybe we'll get to have it on a walking tour sometime. It's a sloping site. We're collecting all the roof water here that spills out into a catch basin in the landscape and then runs across the driveway, down a runnel, and into a catch basin before it finally overflows back into the creek. But it's a house which has a strong relationship to its site. This is where there's an open cavern down underneath the living room bridge. I feel like the interior embodies Hazelite. The scale of the rooms is intimate. There's a big screened-in porch on the corner. There's a pocketed glass door here that connects the living room, and the master bedroom is around on the back side of this. But this is an open corner. Bedroom back there. There's a little spa and a patio back under this big tree. There's a fireplace in the corner. This looking back down over the site. We do this frequently. The main bathroom is looking out onto these pretty trees. Well, we kind of amplified it by plugging in a mirror adjacent to this window. This is that cavern that opens up through the middle of the house. The water, the runnel comes down here, travels across underneath the porch, and before it gets back down to the creek. Now we're getting into a historic house, which was on the tour 11 years ago. This is my own home. I bought a historic home that had been moved 3 times It's now in North Hyde Park. It had been a rental since 1960, so it was a dump. But we fixed it up because I love old houses and modern. This is the old house. We fixed it up, did not add on, just did some reconfiguring and addition, and made the house more comfortable. Turned the entry hall into a dining room. The reason this is in here is because J.R. Carter went on this homes tour in 2009. And when they were ready to build a house out at Frio, he called and said, we want to come back through your house. It captures the feeling that we're looking for our home on Frio, which is Zelahite. So that's when I was introduced to the term. And he said, your house embodies that. So we want to recreate that. We have a clothesline that's strung from the laundry room to a garden shed, and it's on a pulley, so we can actually load clothes from the laundry room and then push them out into the yard. There's an herb garden in the back. We use the whole site. It's just a city lot. Okay, we're on our way to Frio. I got to ride out with JR and David in JR's helicopter. This helipad sits in the middle. This is normally this is that field of what? Did I say JR's? Yeah. It's David's helicopter. David learned to fly after this, but we flew with a professional pilot. While this is that field of wildflowers, there's a helipad in the middle. This is up at the head of the river. It gets deeper down toward where the house is. This is our building site. We actually built one of our buildings right in the middle of these trees. The big cluster of main house and guest cottages are out here with these trees kind of meandering through the middle. Here's the side of our garage. I want you to see this house over to the side. Because of the way we developed our property, we don't ever see this house. This is as close as another house would get. This is a building which is on the site. This is the clubhouse for that little community. I knew early on that the inspiration for this house needs to be different from their city house. The Carters have a wonderful mid-century modern house in Austin. I had been to the Anson Jones house at Washington on the Brazos, and I thought, that's what this house needs to be like. Porch, breezeway through the middle, very simple forms. That's the Anson Jones house. In addition, we were looking at these old agrarian barns and structures for inspiration. Stone on the bottom, wood on the top. Frio site plan. This is that house we could see. This is not there, but this is a potential future house. Our project is right here in the middle. There's a garage looking through the trees straight toward the river. The river is here. The road is here. What we did was we rotated again. We rotated the buildings on the 45.
None of the houses out there actually sit down on the river because the floodplain comes almost up to the back of that house on the left.
The floodplain is right here. So all this property is not going to be developed, and there are no fences. So we knew that we could rotate the houses and look out these long views toward the river and never actually look into an adjacent house. And it really, the experience works.
The other thing that's nice about the rotation, speaking of the long views, there are obviously lot lines out there and people are restricted to where they can build, but because the houses are rotated and the views are through your neighbor's property and you don't see your neighbors, you actually feel like your property is bigger than what you actually paid for.
These are the early concept. These are the real early concept drawings. That last sketch, this is the main house. There's a conditioned pod that's living room and kitchen. There's another conditioned pod that's the main bedroom. Then over the top is this bunk room and a guest room. There's this center breezeway that is the dining room. There's a front porch and a back porch, All of that is screened. There are glass walls at each end of this dining breezeway space that go back into a pocket. So when those are open, they're completely gone. But they can close it and condition the dining room. But the owner reports that even in August, they leave this open through the day and maybe just close it up mid-afternoon so that they can cool the center space down before dinner. The little guest houses are two identical little guest houses, but their windows are oriented toward the view, so the experience is different in each one of them. It's a bathroom, a little kitchenette, a main room, and there's a loft over the end. And there are these simple shapes.
The two sections, the top section is through the main house, the lower section is through the garage, or sorry, through the one of the guest houses. And I don't know that we have a section through the garage in this presentation, but its section is, oh, there you go. So you can see that the sections are all quite similar. And what we didn't talk about when we were breezing through the rural barn images, because we had four buildings on this site, all of which had different programs, and the programs ultimately led to floor plans which were of different sizes and shapes. We thought, how in the world are we going to organize these four buildings to sit on the same site? So in looking at these barns, we ultimately decided that, well, if we have a simple shed or barn-like structure, we can run the roof out as long as it needs to capture the volumes that we intend to in the plan. And then if the roof gets to be a bit too long, or we've sort of reached the apex of what we feel like is an appropriate scale on the second floor, then we can flip the roof back down and serve as a brim of a hat towards a southern or a western exposure, or we can capture a porch on the back side. So that's a brief explanation as to how we came about the form generation for these buildings.
And these are all early model studies that we made.
You can also see that the interior, some of these interior models and the exterior also, we were thinking as we were on that farmhouse in Pendleton, you know, how do we put these buildings together with sort of simple materials that are readily available? We don't have a clue who the craftsmen are going to be. We'll be lucky to speak to the craftsmen. We got really lucky in working with Dalglish on this job because they did such a great job in crafting it, but we didn't know that going in, having no idea who the trades were going to be. So the idea that we sort of stripped down the details and the forms to these very rudimentary components, I think the craftsmen were then able to make the details really sing, because there wasn't a whole lot of complexity in the volumes or the detailing.
So we're just going to go through a few images. We had the materials are all, this is all Western red cedar with limestone cladding on the foundation and this corrugated tin roof.
I will say, if there was any complexity on the whole job, it was that, getting the siding to flush up with the foundation, because we wanted the buildings to appear as though that the stone was actually the foundation, that it wasn't a concrete slab with stone applied to it. So after we got out of the ground, everything was, you know, fairly straightforward after that.
And I want to give a shout out here to Lionheart Places, who sponsored us on this. They did the landscaping, and they did a beautiful job of revegetating the site. The only area that's not natural is this central area between the main house and the cottages, which is where the kids roll around barefooted. You notice this elevated deck between the main house and the guest houses. That is so the kids can run back and forth barefooted. And they actually, well, I was there in June, they were out here wrestling on this lawn. Otherwise, it's all native. This is that central breezeway. Shota Yamaguchi Design made some beautiful tables for us. We use them often. This is a giant slab table that seats 10 or 12 people. He made a round kitchen table for us. We helped Anne, the homeowner, with interiors. We applied finishes and color. But Anne is a graphic designer, and she really did the furnishings herself, and it's pretty whimsical and fun. There is Anne working in her studio. The art studio really is used. When I was there, the kids were out here making a project. Anne wanted to be as close as she could to the outside for her tub. I love this shot because it is completely spontaneous. This is the day that Tobin and I were out shooting the job. I just had to include that because it's so pretty. This was right after construction before we landscaped. And that's Frio. So we have are there questions?
There are a few.
Okay.
One of the very first ones at the very beginning from Ingrid Gonzalez Featherston is if it's regarding the building materiality, whether it was something that you guys proposed or directed by the client.
We proposed it. We wanted to use materials that were readily available. So again, it was Western red cedar, limestone, and corrugated metal.
And I will say also that we proposed initially that these guest houses be red. We didn't know exactly what that would be initially, whether it be paint or what we ultimately landed on was a reactive pigmented stain. But that took a little coaxing, both with David Dowlish and the homeowner, the idea that we were going to put these bright red buildings out on this ranch was a new idea for everybody out there.
I think Anne loved that.
Did she love that idea?
Yeah, she did. In fact, I think she really wants maybe asked if we could make them red. Anyway, they faded within a year. Okay, what's the next question?
The next question goes back to the Dutch term Gezelligheid.
Yes.
And someone is interested in knowing whether it has any relationship to the Scandinavian term Hij.
Huga, which I'm sure that's not the correct pronunciation. Yes, I think they mean the same thing. We just don't have an English translation.
I think that's a heated discussion because I read somewhere somebody had talked about this project having moments of Huga, and then in the comment thread there were people arguing about the differences between Gezelligheid and Huga.
Well, we're not experts.
So yeah, we're not qualified to answer that.
Okay, and somebody mentioned that David referred to the combo of modern and old, and they would like to know your thoughts on this regarding the interior design.
Well, the forms are modern. The detailing is crisp, but I think the materials actually give it. Can you answer that? The owner inserted her personality into this. So that eclectic interior is the owner having fun with the house. And it was fun. I think part of that was because this is a vacation home for them. This is a retreat. Their house in town is mid-century modern and with modern furniture and very, very crisp and neutral and quiet. And she wanted to have fun with this place. I love the mix. My own house is the historic house with modern furniture.
I think that really comes down to how you define traditional, right? We don't often do tassels and dentils and egg dart and things of that nature. But I would say that this project is, some people would say it's traditional because you can look at it and see an old barn, right? But the pantry has chicken wallpaper, for instance. It's not smooth stucco and steel paneling and big expanses of glass like you might characterize modern buildings. But these buildings certainly have all the modern conveniences of a current day home. And I think we paid very close attention to making the detailing crisp, which a lot of people would say is modern. So I think, and I would hope that many of our projects appeal to people whom are interested in traditional architecture and also people who consider themselves modernists. I think there's kind of a blurring of the lines there, depending on what you choose to see, especially in this project.
All right. And a more technical one, Christy Seals is interested in the roof system and whether it is screw down sheets on decking and how it's insulated.
Do you want to answer that?
I can tell you it is a screw down roof. I can't tell you much more other than that.
The outer envelope is insulated because, and then each of the living compartments has variable speed. I think we put in Mitsubishi equipment in there into each of the compartments is fully contained and self-insulated.
All right. And I believe that is all the questions we have for now. Oh, one more. This one's a small one. Somebody's wondering whether the studio table came with the swing out stools.
Yes, it did.
Oh, and another one just came in from Murray Legg. It says, can you talk a bit about the courtyard concept, where it came from, challenges, leaving conditioned space to get to other structures and giving the boardwalk nature of interior space, lawn versus wild space, live grassland?
You
I don't
know,
know.
yeah. What's interesting about this? One of the great benefits of pulling pieces apart is when you take program functions and you pull them apart, you capture the landscape between, and the space between these structures. They're close enough to each other that the space between becomes a giant outdoor room, and that was intentional here. We intended for that center space to be the communal space. This project could theoretically house 4 different families: the main house, then the 2 guest houses, and then the art studio and with yoga room above. There's a full bathroom there and a bed in the yoga studio. So it's 4 distinct dwellings, and because of the separation provided, 2 families were able to quarantine and still be happy with each other by the end of quarantine. But that central yard is the communal space, and it is the lawn, as I said, where the kids can run barefoot. I think one of the biggest ideas actually came from the homeowner. JR suggested that they had stayed in a house which was connected to a guest house by an elevated deck, and asked us to look at that here. So all these buildings are placed at the same elevation, even though we're on a slight slope. That elevated deck is what makes the buildings feel like they're all the same, even though you're moving outside. Somehow being on that floor,
You don't have to put your shoes on.
Shoes on to go back and forth. And that deck is magic.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a little bit, the courtyard. From the beginning, the courtyard in our minds was always the only place that we intended to have manicured lawn. We had hoped that the site would be revegetated and mostly wild, but so when viewed from the exterior, from the street, from the river, these objects were sort of sitting in a wild landscape, but the courtyard was the opportunity to give the kids a play yard without feeling like we made a suburban lawn.
I will say, originally I wanted to put the fire pit in the middle of the courtyard, but the owner and Lionheart decided to put it out in the field, which was a beautiful solution because being isolated out in the field, it feels to me like the stars are more visible. You don't have lights from the house competing. And then watching the kids wrestle in the yard was rewarding.
Okay. Do you think we have time for one last one?
Sure, real fast.
This is from John Blood. In the main house, he asks, where is the kitchen and what is the relationship to the central dining room?
Let's see. Well, there's the kitchen. Well, I'm going to go back to the plan, John. Kitchen and living. There's a pantry here. This is the main dining room in the middle. So what makes the house work so well is there's this flow. There's always this kind of circular flow, these loops. So even though the compartments are small, there are no dead ends. There are pass-through windows here, out, or casements here, so that they could pass food out to here if they needed to. We were going to originally put the grill right here, but we ended up putting it out here. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I hope you have a good tour. I guess we'll sign off now, Antonio. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.